My son told me I wasn't invited for Christmas while he stood inside the house I was paying for, and behind him, hanging dead center on the tree, was my late wife's angel ornament. My jaw locked so hard I tasted metal. 10 minutes later, sitting in my truck with my hands shaking on the steering wheel, I canceled the mortgage payment. I thought that would hurt them. I had no idea I'd just touched the smallest part of what they'd done. By morning, I'd know why my key no longer worked, why my room had disappeared, and what paper with my forged name on it they thought I'd never see. If you've ever learned your place in someone's life at their front door, stay with me because that lock wasn't the betrayal. It was the evidence. The truth started 3 weeks earlier with something small enough to ignore if you love people too much. I'm 68. I was married to one woman for 40 years. I buried her 6 winters ago. I have one son, Adam, one granddaughter, Ruby, bad knees, a repaired shoulder, and the kind of habits a man gets from a lifetime of work that couldn't afford mistakes. I spent 42 years as an electrician. You learn to notice what changed in a room. A new switch plate. A wire rerouted wrong. A smell that means something's heating behind the wall. That first week of December, I walked into Adam's house and noticed 3 things in under 5 seconds. The cedar chest from the upstairs guest room was in the garage. The framed picture of my wife Louise holding Ruby as a baby was gone from the upstairs landing. And when I set my key in the front lock later, it dragged like it didn't belong there anymore. Adam and Caroline lived in Brookside, the kind of neighborhood where every porch has matching planters and nobody leaves a trash bin visible past 6 in the evening. Their house was bigger than they needed and more expensive than they could truly carry, but it photographed well, and Caroline loved anything that looked expensive from across the street. I helped buy it. Not with advice. With money. When they were short on the down payment 8 years ago, I sold the duplex Louise and I had kept as a rental property and put $180,000 into that house. Not as a blind gift. As a family loan, written down, signed properly, because Louise had made me promise before she died that grief would not turn me foolish. Love them, she told me in hospice, her hand cold and dry in mine. But don't disappear for them. At the time, I thought I understood what she meant. I didn't. The guest room upstairs had slowly become my room. 2 flannel shirts in the closet. My shaving kit in the drawer. A lamp I liked for reading. A photo of Louise by the bed. Nothing dramatic. Just enough to say I belonged there sometimes. That day the room had been stripped. Caroline saw me looking toward the garage and gave me that careful little smile of hers, the one that always felt like being politely corrected by a woman who thought warmth was for less disciplined people. We're just making space, she said. My parents are staying more often around the holidays, and we need the room to function better. Function better. There are words selfish people use when they want cruelty to sound organized. I asked where my things were. In the chest, she said. Safer there. Less clutter. Adam came in from the kitchen with sawdust still on his sleeves and kissed my cheek like nothing in the world had shifted. Don't read into it, Dad. We're just rearranging. I might have let it go if not for the lock. I turned the key. It scraped halfway in and stopped. Adam stepped closer too fast. Yeah, I've been meaning to tell you. Mechanism's weird. I'll probably replace it. Probably. At the island behind him, Caroline snapped a folder shut so quickly I only saw one word stamped in silver on the front. Bridgewater. It meant nothing to me then. It meant everything 2 weeks later. That should have been enough warning. It wasn't, because warning signs look harmless when they arrive one at a time. Thanksgiving at Caroline's parents' house was worse. Ronald and Judith Ashford lived in a stone house with a circular drive, a heated mudroom, and a dining table so long you had to choose who mattered before you sat down. Ronald wore cashmere indoors and treated every conversation like an acquisition. Judith spoke softly enough that people missed the insult until they were already bleeding from it. Halfway through dinner, Judith asked Ruby if she was excited for a quiet Christmas morning with just immediate family. Ruby froze with her fork halfway to her mouth. She looked at me before she answered. That is still the detail that gets under my skin. A 12-year-old checking whether telling the truth would hurt her grandfather. Adam reached for the stuffing and said, We're still figuring out the holiday schedule. Caroline smiled into her wineglass. My parents are staying over this year and the house will be chaotic. We may keep things simple. Simple. I nodded and kept eating because grown men learn how to survive certain humiliations by becoming very interested in their plate. But on the drive home I got a text from Ruby. Grandpa, are you still doing Angel First this year? Every year since Louise died, I had brought over her cedar angel ornament and hung it first on the tree with Ruby. Louise had made it by hand from a scrap of fence board when Adam was still in middle school. One wing had a crack from where Adam knocked it down at 14. Louise glued it back together and said broken things that stayed beautiful deserved a place where everyone could see them. That ornament was not decoration to me. It was proof that memory could still live in a house that kept changing. I texted Ruby back. Of course I am. She answered right away. Mom says maybe not Christmas morning. Don't be mad. I sat in my car outside my apartment for a long time looking at that message. Then I went upstairs, took the angel out of the hall closet, and held it in both hands under the kitchen light. Louise had painted the robe cream white and written peace in tiny gold letters along the hem. The paint on the left wing had worn thin where Ruby always rubbed it with her thumb. I remember hearing Louise in my head as clearly as if she'd leaned over my shoulder. Frank, when people start shrinking your place, believe the size they give you. I still wasn't ready to believe it. The week before Christmas, the house changed faster. The family photos in the upstairs hallway disappeared. The bench I built for the front window got moved into the dining room. Countertops emptied out. Ruby's drawings vanished from the refrigerator. A metal lockbox appeared on the side fence. And one afternoon when I came by with a replacement bathroom switch plate Adam had asked me to install, Caroline almost didn't let me in. She opened the door only wide enough for her face and one shoulder. Behind her, the house smelled sharply of citrus cleaner, the kind used before strangers come through. Today's not great, she said. I lifted the switch plate. Adam asked me. Right, but we're in the middle of getting things sorted. Sorted? Behind her, a man in loafers walked down the hall with a tape measure and a leather portfolio tucked under his arm. Too polished to be a contractor. Too interested in corners to be family. When she saw where I was looking, Caroline said, "He's helping us think about storage." That might have worked if the portfolio hadn't been stamped with the word realty. Adam appeared in the kitchen doorway and immediately looked guilty, which is how I knew I was no longer imagining anything. "We're just exploring options," he said. "What kind of options?" He rubbed the back of his neck. "Future stuff. Future stuff. The language of cowards is always vague until your money is involved." I could have pushed harder then, but Ruby was upstairs practicing violin badly and bravely, and I didn't want the sound of adults breaking each other reaching her room. So I fixed the switch plate, washed my hands, and left. Ruby walked me to the door and slipped a candy cane into my coat pocket. "If you come on Christmas morning," she whispered, "come early." "Why?" She looked back toward the kitchen, then at me. "Just early." Then she hugged me and held on 1 second too long. Children add that extra second when they know something and don't have the power to stop it. Christmas Eve arrived hard and cold. The air had that brittle sound it gets when the ground is frozen through. I wore my good charcoal coat, carried a pecan pie Ruby loved, a wrap tool set for Adam, a jewelry box with Louise's snowflake pin for Ruby, and the angel wrapped in tissue paper inside a grocery bag because I didn't like leaving it on the seat where it could slide. The night before, Caroline had texted me. "Tomorrow is packed. My parents are here. We'll probably do something separate next week." Adam followed with a voicemail I listened to twice because I wanted to hear what kind of man my son sounded like when he couldn't see my face. "Hey Dad. Don't make this a thing, okay? It's crowded here. We'll celebrate another day. Another day." There are phrases people use when they want your absence to sound temporary. I went anyway. Every house on their street was lit. Reeds on doors, white lights on hedges, warm windows, and the smell of wood smoke hanging low in the cold. I remember climbing the porch steps and hearing laughter through the glass before I even knocked. I tried my key first. It didn't turn. That punched the breath out of me harder than I expected. Then the front door opened and there was Adam, and over his shoulder I could see the Christmas tree. Louise's angel was already hanging front and center. Someone had gone into the hall closet at their house, found the ornament in the box where I'd left it after last year, and put it up without me. That was the detail that split something open in me. He looked at the pie, then at my face, and said, "Dad, we weren't expecting you." My fingers went so numb the pie tin shifted against my palms. "I can see that," I said. He stepped outside enough to block the doorway with his body. Not a shove. Worse. A refusal. "Please don't do this tonight." From inside, Caroline called, "Who is it?" He answered without taking his eyes off me. "My dad." Then she came into view in a cream sweater and gold earrings, a wineglass in one hand, irritation in her face like I was a delivery she hadn't signed for. "Frank," she said. "We already explained this wasn't a good night." Ruby started toward the door from the living room. Judith caught her wrist. Not violently. Efficiently. That was when my chest went hot and my hands went cold, and I understood all at once that this wasn't an awkward holiday mix-up. This was an exit plan carried out politely. The missing room. The changed lock. The language. The staged house. Christmas was just the first day they were willing to let me feel it. I handed Adam the pie because I didn't trust myself to keep holding it. Keep it, I said. You've already taken the rest. Then I turned around and walked back to my truck. I sat there 11 minutes without starting the engine. Frost crept at the edges of the windshield. My throat hurt. I could still see the angel through the front window if I leaned slightly left. At 9:14 p.m., under the yellow light over my kitchen sink, I canceled the automatic mortgage transfer I'd been sending every month. $2,843. I did not send a message. I did not threaten. I did not call them names. I just pressed cancel and watched the bank screen ask, "Are you sure?" Yes. I thought that was me taking back control. I still didn't know how far ahead of me they already were. At 7:06 Christmas morning, Adam called. "What did you do?" he snapped before I could say hello. "Merry Christmas." The payment didn't hit. No. In the background I could hear Caroline saying, "Tell him he can't do this. Tell him we have things coming out." Adam lowered his voice. "If this is about last night. About the night I was locked out of the house I helped pay for?" It was crowded. Caroline's parents were there. I saw them. We wanted one calm holiday. One calm holiday. As if I were weather. I asked, "Why was my key changed?" Silence. "Adam. Why was my key changed?" "We upgraded the locks." "For security from who?" "Don't do this." "No," I said. "You don't do this. And before another dollar leaves my account, you're going to send me the mortgage statement." He went quiet in a different way then. "Calculating. That's insulting." "What's insulting is using my wife's ornament while locking me out." The statement by noon, Adam. Caroline came on the line without permission. "Frank, you are punishing a child over hurt feelings." "No," I said. "I'm done financing adults who lie." I hung up before she could answer. At 8:13 Ruby texted me. "I'm sorry." Then another. "Mom took the angel from your box last week." And then the one that made me sit down. "Please don't fight because of me." By noon no statement came. At 12:41 I called the mortgage company myself. My name was still on the original paperwork as guarantor because Adam had never been able to refinance without me. I knew enough of the details to get through security. The woman on the phone verified the account, clicked around, and then said the sentence that turned my hurt into something colder. "Sir, there is no December payment due." I thought I'd heard her wrong. "What do you mean?" "The loan was placed into hardship forbearance in October." I stared at the water ring on my kitchen table and said, "Explain that to me." Temporary payment relief. Financial hardship. Review date in February. I asked who applied. She couldn't tell me everything, but she told me enough. The application included business downturn, cash flow strain, and support obligations for an elderly dependent family member residing at the property. Me. They had used me to help justify forbearance. And while no mortgage payment was due in November or December, they had still let me keep sending them money. I thanked the woman, hung up, and stood at the sink with both hands on the counter until feeling came back into my fingers. Suddenly every strange little detail lined up. They weren't just pushing me out of family space. They were preparing to sell the house. Stage it. Strip signs of me out of it. Keep my money flowing while they shuffled paperwork in the background. Smile until they no longer needed me. That should have been the full truth. It wasn't. At 2:10 that afternoon someone buzzed my apartment. It was Ruby. She was on her bike, cheeks red from the wind, backpack hanging open, breath coming in little white bursts. The first thing she said when I opened the downstairs door was, "I wasn't supposed to come." The second thing she said was, "I brought your angel." She held it out in both hands wrapped in one of the kitchen towels from their house. I took it carefully. The wing had a fresh chip in the edge. Gold paint scraped along the hem. Then she reached into her backpack and pulled out a manila envelope. "This was in the office trash," she said. "Mom told Dad if you came over again he should distract you and she'd handle the papers." I thought maybe it was school stuff, but then I saw your name. Inside the envelope were 3 documents. A draft listing agreement with Bridgewater Realty. A copy of the hardship affidavit. And a letter with my name typed at the bottom saying all money I had contributed to the house was an unconditional gift, that I lived there only at their generosity, and that I had no financial claim against the property. The signature on it was supposed to be mine. It wasn't. Not close enough for me. Maybe close enough for people who wanted not to look hard. I read it twice. Then a third time. Ruby stood in my kitchen twisting the strap of her backpack and watching my face like a child listening for storm windows. "Mom said after New Year's you'd have to understand boundaries," she whispered. That was the moment I stopped thinking about dignity and started thinking about danger. Because this wasn't just rude. It wasn't just cruel. It was paper. Intent. Strategy. I made Ruby hot chocolate. I called Adam and told him exactly where she was. He showed up 18 minutes later, scared first, then angry when he saw she was safe enough to be brave. "You do not take my child without telling me," he said the second he came in. "She rode here," I said. "Because you left the truth in your trash." I laid the forged letter on the table. You went pale then hard. "You went through our papers?" "Your daughter rescued them." He looked at Ruby. She moved behind my chair. That was the instant something in me shut and locked. "You do not glare at her," I said quietly. "You forged my name. You took my money while no payment was due. You used me for hardship relief and locked me out on Christmas Eve. If there is shame in this room, it belongs to you. It wasn't like that. Men say that when it is exactly like that. Then tell me how it was." He paced once. Ran a hand through his hair. "The forbearance was temporary. The listing was just an option. Caroline wanted flexibility. The letter was paperwork. Paperwork. It was never going to be used against you. It already was used against me." He looked at the floor. Not confused. Caught. Then he said the ugliest truthful thing he'd said yet. "You always make money feel conditional." I nodded slowly. "Yes. Because trust is a condition." He had no answer for that. When he took Ruby home, he didn't meet my eyes. The next morning, I drove to Marion Cole's office with the envelope, my transfer records, and Louise's angel in a box on the passenger seat. Marion had handled the original paperwork years ago. She was sharp, unsentimental, and old enough to have lost patience with family people who thought love was a legal strategy. She read every page, then opened a file cabinet and pulled out a copy of the original family note. "You did one smart thing," she said. "I married Louise?" "That too. But I also recorded your lien." I stared at her. "You did. You asked me to protect the loan, Franklin. I protected the loan." I sat back and laughed once because if I hadn't laughed I might have cried from relief. Adam and Caroline had either forgotten or never fully understood that my contribution wasn't a sentimental handshake. It sat there in public record. Quiet. Waiting. Exactly the way decent protection always does. Marion set the forged letter aside. "We're not calling them and giving them time to rewrite their story. We let them invite witnesses. Then we give them facts." That afternoon, Adam texted me. "Can we talk like adults?" A minute later, Caroline texted. "Come tomorrow at 3. Privately. Let's settle this before it gets ugly." Before it gets ugly. As if ugly hadn't answered the door in a cream sweater holding a wineglass. I agreed to come. At 2:55 the next day, I pulled into their driveway. Marion parked behind me. The house looked beautiful. That's what still enrages me. Garland on the porch rail. Clean windows. White plates already set on the dining table. The bench I built positioned just right beneath the front window like a prop from a life they wanted to curate without the man who made it possible. Adam opened the door and went stiff when he saw Marion. "What is this?" he asked. "A conversation," she said, stepping inside. In the dining room sat Caroline, Judith, and Ronald. And standing near the sideboard with a leather portfolio under one arm was a woman in a navy coat I recognized immediately from the business card tucked in the Bridgewater papers. Dana Keene, the realtor. Ruby sat at the far end of the table, shoulders straight, eyes too old for 12. No one offered me a seat. That was fine. I hadn't come to stay. Caroline started. "Frank, this is unnecessary." I put the angel's box on the table and looked at my son. "When were you planning to tell me the mortgage entered forbearance in October?" Adam froze. Ronald frowned. "What?" Caroline jumped in. "That's a temporary financial arrangement. It has nothing to do with today." "It has everything to do with today," I said. I laid out the transfer records first. Month after month of mortgage payments from me. Then the hardship affidavit naming support of an elderly dependent family member. Then the forged letter. Ronald picked it up and read enough to drain the color from his face. "Did you sign his name?" he asked Adam. Adam said, "It was a draft." Marion spoke calmly. "A draft included in a packet designed to minimize Mr. Mercer's claim while preparing the property for sale." Dana slowly lowered her portfolio to the floor. Caroline's mouth tightened. "Sale has not been decided. The listing agreement says otherwise," I said. Judith looked sharply at her daughter. "You're selling the house?" Caroline turned defensive too fast. "We are evaluating a transition. Brookside no longer aligns with our current needs." Even Ronald looked embarrassed by that sentence. I said, Then let's discuss my current contribution to your current needs. $34,116 in the last year alone, plus the original loan, plus repairs, plus labor. While you were telling lenders I lived there as an elderly dependent and telling me I wasn't invited for Christmas. Dana spoke next very carefully. There is a recorded family lien? Marion handed her a copy. Yes. Dana scanned it, then looked at Caroline with professional alarm. You told me the family contribution was informal. It is informal, Caroline said. No, I said. It was generous. That is not the same thing. Adam pushed back his chair. We were going to settle with you after the sale. By using a document that says I have no claim? It wasn't final. It was forged. He opened his mouth and closed it again. Then I told him about Christmas Eve. Not dramatically. Just clearly. The changed lock. The pie in my hands. Louise's angel already on the tree. Ruby reaching for me and being held back. Adam telling me not to do this tonight as if showing up to love my own family was the offense. By the time I finished, nobody in that room looked comfortable anymore. Not even Judith. Caroline said, we needed one holiday without emotional pressure. That sentence did something to Ronald. Maybe because he finally heard the steel under her manners. Maybe because even he understood that excluding an old man from Christmas in a house he funded was not discipline. It was rot. He looked at Adam. He paid your mortgage? Adam stared at the table. How much? Ronald asked again. I answered for him. Then I pointed around the room. I wired the sconces in that foyer. I repaired the nursery window when Ruby was 3. I built the bench under that front window. I fixed your boiler last February so your pipes wouldn't freeze. I came every time something broke because that is what fathers do. And somehow I became the problem to hide when company came. At the far end of the table, Ruby made the smallest sound in her throat. That sound did what all the paperwork couldn't. It ripped the performance apart. Dana straightened. I cannot represent this property, she said. Not with an undisclosed lien, a family dispute, and potentially false lender documentation. Caroline snapped, you are overreacting. No, Dana said. I am protecting my license. Marion set the final papers on the table. Demand for accounting. Notice of default under the private note. Preservation demand for all correspondence and lender submissions. 30 days to cure before enforcement begins. Judith whispered, oh my God. Adam stood up so fast his chair skidded backward. Dad, are you really doing this? To your own son? And there it was. The one sentence every selfish person reaches for when consequences finally touch them. I looked at him and felt strangely calm. You locked your father out on Christmas Eve, I said. You forged his name. You let him keep paying money you no longer owed. If this feels cruel to you now, Adam, that's because you thought decency was a resource only other people had to provide. The room went still enough to hear the furnace click on. Caroline laughed, but it cracked in the middle. You wouldn't force us out of the house. I met her eyes. I would never have walked us here. You did. Then Ruby stood up. No one told her to. She just stood, came around the table and walked to my side. She put both hands on the angel box and asked in a small steady voice, Grandpa, can you take Grandma home now? Caroline snapped, Ruby, sit down. Ruby didn't move. I put my hand over hers. Yes, I said. I can. That was the real end of it. Not the legal papers. Not the realtor backing out. Not Ronald quietly saying, with more disgust than volume, do not ask us for money until this is fully explained. The end was a child choosing where safety lived. The fallout came fast. Bridgewater dropped the listing immediately. The lender opened a fraud review on the hardship submission. Adam called me 14 times in 3 days, cycling through anger, bargaining, apology, then anger again like a man trying on old keys in a lock he himself had changed. Caroline sent one long message saying I had weaponized generosity, which was such a perfect description of her own conscience that I saved it. Ronald and Judith did not rescue them. That surprised Caroline more than it surprised me. Ronald hated scandal, and being made to look foolish in front of a realtor and an attorney offended him more deeply than any private family drama. Judith stopped sending holiday photos in the family chat. Silence from people like that is not peace. It is social quarantine. 4 days after the confrontation, Adam came to my apartment alone. He looked terrible. Unshaved. Eyes swollen. Coat half-zipped against the cold. He stood in my doorway and said, I don't know how it got this far. I let that sit there because some sentences deserve the embarrassment of open air. Then he said, I knew about the letter. Not I found out later. Not Caroline handled that. I knew. I nodded once. I figured. He cried. Not theatrically. Not neatly. But crying is not repentance. It's just pain leaving the body. Repentance is what a man does next. He said Caroline had pushed the sale because they were drowning. Credit cards. Business debt. School tuition. Image. Always image. She didn't want to downsize and look like they failed, so the plan was to sell high, move to a smaller house farther out, and tell me after the fact that the money issues had forced hard choices. The forged letter was there in case anyone questioned my contribution. The lock change was supposed to avoid scenes. Christmas was supposed to go by cleanly enough that they could launch the listing in January. And Ruby? I asked. He covered his face. That was answer enough. I told him I would not discuss forgiveness until there had been action. Here's what action looked like. Adam moved out of the Brookside house within 6 weeks. He rented a small townhouse across town and filed for separation 3 months later. I'm not pretending I caused the marriage to fail. I think Rod had been there a long time. I just refused to keep financing the paint. The house sold in the spring, not through Bridgewater and not on Caroline's terms. By then there were legal fees, lender scrutiny, and no room left for pretty storytelling. My lien was paid in full from the sale proceeds, along with back sums Marion documented from the months they took my mortgage money during forbearance. Not every dollar I spent over the years came back. I didn't chase every screw and service call. Justice is not accounting down to the last receipt. Sometimes it is simply forcing truth into the light and refusing to leave without your name attached to it. Caroline moved into a luxury apartment she could not afford without help and then, from what I heard, moved again. Adam did the humiliating adult thing at last. He downsized, sold the truck he liked too much, took steady contract work instead of chasing grand plans, and began paying actual child support on time. The first time he mailed me a check toward what Marion had structured in settlement, the memo line read for the note. That tiny line meant more to me than the amount. Because for the first time in years, he had written down what something was instead of dressing it up as something easier to steal. He and I are not healed. I don't know if men always fully come back from seeing the worst version of their own son standing in a doorway under Christmas lights. But he comes by now without entitlement in his shoulders. He calls before he asks for anything. He never says practical when he means selfish. Those are not miracles. They are beginnings. Ruby started staying with me every other Saturday that spring. We cook grilled cheese and tomato soup. She does homework at my kitchen table under the same hanging light Louise once complained was too dim for careful sewing. We take walks if my knees allow it. We talk about books and music and how often adults confuse looking good with being good. The first Saturday she stayed over after the house sold, I let her open the hall closet. Inside, on the top shelf, was the cedar angel in a new padded box. "You kept it," she said. "Of course I did." She touched the cracked wing gently. "Are you going to put her on a tree next Christmas?" I looked at that little hand on Louise's work and thought about houses and money and blood, and all the ways family can be performed without ever being practiced. "Yes," I said. "But not just any tree." That next Christmas, Ruby and I put up a small blue spruce in my apartment. Nothing grand. White lights. Paper stars she made herself. The snowflake pin from Louise in a shadow box on the shelf. A pecan pie cooling on the counter. Adam came in the afternoon. Alone. He stood awkwardly by the door like a man who understood doors better now. Ruby handed him the angel. "Grandpa says you should do it with us this year," she said. He looked at me before he took it. I nodded once. The three of us hung it together. Not because everything was repaired. Not because a single holiday erases what happened on another. But because real family, I've learned, is not who feels entitled to your sacrifice. It's who can stand in the truth with you after the lie is dead. When the tree lights came on, the crack in the angel's wing caught the glow and turned it gold. Louise used to say broken things that stay beautiful deserve the best place where everyone can see them. She was right. So do fathers.